Hey everybody, welcome back to Premierium Live. I'm your host Nick Taylor, and today I'm hanging out with Chad Whitacre from Sentry. Chad, how you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Nick? Hey, everybody.
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, it's good to catch up. I obviously I want to talk about what we're going to talk about today, but also it's a selfish way for me to get to hang with you as well.
Well,
yeah.
Had a lot of fun with you at conferences and stuff. This isn't quite the same, in virtual realm, but it's still worth it.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah,
Good
cool.
to see you.
Yeah, no, great to see you too, man.
Yeah.
So, for folks who might not know who you are, I guess we're going to be talking about open source and funding in there. I'm kind of curious, how did you get into open source?
Oh man! All right, we're going way back.
Buckle up.
Yeah, set the Wayback Machine. Yeah, so I got started in open source pretty early.
Okay.
Call it 2001 or so. I just come out of university and I had a humanities degree, and I was, nobody's going to pay me to use it, and so I needed to do something. So started making websites and started in classic ASP. Remember classic ASP? That's where I started, and then pretty quickly found Python and some of the early Python web frameworks. So yeah, by 2001, 2002, I was all in on Python web programming, and so that's where I got my start in open source. Yeah, it's grown from there.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I did classic ASP as well. Little long in the tooth as well. So
yes, I love it.
A lot of my I'd say probably up until this point, I'd say about 2/3 of my career was in like the .NET ecosystem or Microsoft, like the pre.NET as well. So
classic ASP, it was like the corporate version of PHP.
Yeah, exactly.
It was
and there was like Java server pages too. They all wanted to do a something P.
Yes, it all. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. No, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess like Python, obviously open source. All the Microsoft technologies at the time, at least, were not open source.
Right. Very anti. Right. I mean, early on, it was like, the Halloween documents or something. There was all this scandal and all this like very bitter conflict for many years. Yeah,
but it's definitely interesting because like we're talking about you in the OSS pledge state, but like little side tangent. I got an open source because even though I was doing a lot of .NET, C# and stuff, there was no open source to that really. I mean, basically I was always a fan of JavaScript, and so my kind of foray into open source started off with kind of like Node.js and JavaScript
jQuery,
and like React and like TypeScript in early days, but that's why I went on that path. But that said, to Montreal, not Montreal, to Microsoft's credit, like .NET went open source eventually, and like they're doing a lot of good stuff in open source, I think.
Oh my goodness. I mean, they bought GitHub, right? 2018. Yeah. That was like the big turning point.
Yeah. So that was huge.
Still some anti-Microsoft sentiment out there, but definitely not what it used to be. Microsoft's definitely a huge contributor to open source these days.
Yeah, I know for sure. So so that's cool how you got into open source, and like we're obviously gonna be talking about open source and funding today. Now you're over at Sentry right now, which I feel like pretty much anybody on the web dev planet knows, I hope, but if not, I will drop a link to it if people aren't aware of it.
That's it.
But I'm kind of curious how, like, I know a bunch of people over at Sentry, including Ben Vinegar, who you used to work with. But I'm curious how you ended up over there and in this particular role as head of open source.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a hop, skip, and a jump. So, like I say, got started in open source in the Python world in the aughts. And maybe if I can kind of try and weave both of these together, really kind of experience that tension between the fun of working on open source, kind of with friends, volunteer basis, and then the tension between that and needing to pay the bills and having to go, find closed source work to pay the bills. And so I started a crowdfunding platform in 2012 called GitTip that was it was crowdfunding for open source maintainers. Sentry was one of the companies that
Okay.
was funding maintainers through GitTip, even back in the day, in early days there, 2012 through maybe 2015 or so. But even then, and the reason they knew about it was because, I'd met David Kramer and Armin Ronacher and others in the
Hmm.
Python community, because Sentry started life as a little open source Django plugin
Oh
uh,
yeah.
in 2008. Yeah, so that was the era when we were all going to PyCon and everything, and running into each other there. Yeah, so got to know Sentry and David and those folks for that, and then they were using GitTip to fund maintainers. We
Oh
were
nice.
using Sentry. I was one of the first Sentry customers in 2012, 2013. So Sentry started
Okay.
in 2008, started commercializing not until 2012, and then took venture
Okay.
capital in 2015.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were sort of customers of each other, I guess, and I kind of watched him grow over the years, and then I joined 4.5 years ago as an IC engineer on the open source team at Sentry,
Okay.
and grew from there to this head of open source role.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And uh, this is gonna touch on funding and open source a bit, but like I know
Yeah,
because I've listened to podcasts. This is all like public knowledge, so I'm not. It's not like I'm like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
talking like trash or anything.
Okay.
Um, but I remember Sentry changed their license at some point,
Yeah,
and I know that was, I guess,
big deal.
potentially spicy. So
Yeah, and it was less spicy for Sentry than some of the others. So Sentry did relicense in 2019. So again, a little bit of that history. 2008, Kramer kicked out this little 70-line Django plugin, didn't even put a license on it at first. This was like the
yeah,
heyday of just toss it up on GitHub and keep moving. 2008, relicensed it to BSD, or put a BSD license on it in 2009. And, so 10 years there was BSD. And in the
yeah,
middle of that is when he started the company around it, he and Chris Jennings. And by 2019, this was the era of, I think Cockroach DB was one of the ones that inspired us to relicense to the particular license we use, BSL, business source
okay,
license. But yeah, Elastic, Mongo, a lot of those, they seem to be databases, right? And then Redis.
yeah,
I guess HashiCorp's not quite a database, but yeah, so Sentry's part of that group of companies that kind of started out pure open source, and then sort of came up against the limitations of open source from a business perspective.
yeah,
Made the decision to relicense. Yeah, it was a little spicy, but we didn't end up with, like we saw with Redis. We had the Valkey fork.
hmm
We saw with what was it, Terraform, the Open Tofu fork. Some of these forks.
oh yeah, yeah. They just joined the CNCF Open Tofu, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Linux Foundation seems to help out with a lot of these. Yeah, and we didn't end up experiencing that with Sentry. We could talk about why that is or whatnot.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's definitely, I don't know. We think about open source sustainability, and there's really kind of two directions that we've gone with it at Sentry.
yeah,
On the one hand, and these are these two initiatives that we launched last year, kind of industry initiatives. And one is related to this licensing question.
yeah,
We eventually kind of threw up our hands and said, okay, fine. We admit it. Sentry is no longer open source.
yeah,
And we staked out this kind of, new old term, revitalized this term, fair source. So
yeah.
Sentry itself, Sentry is a fair source product. Okay. We can talk about that.
Okay,
But then the other side of that is the pledge that you alluded to, this open source pledge. So those are kind of
okay,
two ways that we see the industry going in terms of sustainability for developers. One is kind of taking a little step back from open source to this fair source, and the other is leaning into open source and saying, you know what,
yeah.
we really got to pay the maintainers, and that's what the pledge is about.
Yeah, for sure. And the reason why I brought up the Sentry licensing is not, it's not because I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I mean, at the end of the day, like
Yeah.
companies are, a company does need to make money. You do have, like, I guess it's just interesting because this kind of goes back to like what is open source really then,
Sure.
because like when I started, like I started contributing in 2015, but open
Yeah.
source was, or even the idea of open source even before that
Yeah.
term was coined, was like
Yeah.
people just wanted to build stuff and share it,
Yeah.
And at some point money got in the mix and people are like, oh, I can take these free Lego blocks.
Yeah.
And I don't know when that happened, but like that's where things got all wishy-washy, I think.
Yeah. I mean, to an extent, it's happened all along. Um, you know, you go back to the origin story of the free software movement, which predates open source. So, you know, a little bit of chronology. So, open source as a movement started in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Before that, it was kind of a rebranding of the free software movement, which started in 1983. So, Richard Stallman starts free software in 83.
Yeah.
And his origin story is around this Xerox printer. Do you ever hear this story about RMS and the Xerox printer? This is
Uh,
like
I do not.
this is
I
the
know like
origin
Apple
myth.
stole some stuff from Xerox, but that's another
Okay.
thing, I think. But
Yeah.
I don't know the printer story.
So yeah, I guess real quick, you know, RMS Richard Stallman was a hacker at the MIT AI lab in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s,
Yeah.
and lived in this like utopia of academic sharing. You know, it's like the early days of the internet, and you know, everybody at all the universities is sharing all this code with each other, and everybody's employed by the university. They don't have to think about money. They're just like living in this bubble of sharing software, and kind of develop this norm, this like expectation that that's how it's done. And Xerox donated a high-end newfangled laser printer. This is 1982 or whatever, maybe lower. I
Okay.
don't have the exact. And they locked down the software on it. And this like really pissed off Richard Stallman and all his buddies because they're like, man, you know, when the paper jams, I have to go the whole way down the hall to clear the paper jam, and I can't have access to the software to like fix the bugs that cause the paper jams or whatever. Yeah. So this question of, I guess, the tension between the commercial and the community has been there for, you know, for generations now at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and that alluding to Microsoft earlier, that's what
Yeah.
we saw there is, you know, tension between community and commercial. And what we're
Yeah.
trying to do with Fair Source is kind of tease that apart, because open source itself,
Hmm.
again, a lot of this is what is open source and what's the definition of
Yeah.
open source. And you know, we've got this four freedoms that free software, you know, Richard Stallman defined. Then we've got the open source definition, this 10-point definition that Bruce Perens wrote, that's
Yeah.
the basis for open source. And none of it in there, none of those say anything about the governance of a project. None of those say anything about how a project is governed and run. It's about the intellectual property of the source code, the copyright of the source code.
Yeah.
And that's where this ambiguity has come from. You have a project, who owns it, who runs it, how is it run? And that's been
Yeah.
ambiguous. And so for what we have been calling single vendor commercial open source, that's what we
Hmm.
see with like Mongo is the single vendor owner of the MongoDB project. It's
Yeah.
not a community nonprofit governed thing. It's a commercially for-profit governed thing. And that's where
Yeah.
that tension comes from. And so what we try to do with Fair Source is tease that apart. Say, okay, if you're gonna be single vendor commercial, don't 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 muddy the waters. Just go ahead and like be
Yeah.
upfront from the start. Let's build this Fair Source brand around that, because that's valuable in and of itself. And that's
Yeah.
really, yeah, that's what we're trying to do
Yeah.
with that.
No, that makes sense. I think one thing, like, I mean, I know I know some companies do
Yeah.
open source as like a marketing thing, you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
and you know, I think that's okay. I mean, like it's still promoting open source to some degree, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I find it interesting, even in like a fair source case, that
Yeah.
you put the bits out there. So like I think that's still healthy for a project, because I've worked in closed source, and it's like
Yeah.
if you're in closed source, it's like the only people that can fix it are the people that see it, you
Exactly.
know.
Yeah.
And you know, like for example, I'm not necessarily the best security expert in the world, so like there could be tons of stuff I'm missing, and you know, you put that out in open source, and you know, yes, people will critique or whatever, but you literally have the planet's eyes on that to fix those things. And I'd like to think in general people are good netizens there. There's
Yeah.
obviously bad actors as well,
Yeah.
but you know,
Yeah, I mean the win I like to share there. Do you know this company Plausible? They have an analytics
yeah,
product that, you know, that privacy first analytics. Basically, we're not Google Analytics,
yeah,
and it's a good product, and it's open source. but it's this single vendor commercial open source, open
Yeah.
core. But what's great about it is, I was able to give them a pull request. Like I was, kind of early days on the product. There were some rough edges, and there was one thing that was bugging me, and
Yeah.
it bugged me enough that I jumped into the code and I gave them a little pull request, and they accepted it. Now it's in there, and
Yeah.
I guess what that illustrates for me is like there is a sentiment from some parts of the community where uh, this kind of resentment of free labor, that it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you talk about the marketing aspect of open source and the benefit for companies in marketing, but another benefit, theoretically at least, is you're going to
Yeah.
get free labor. You're going to get people doing your work for you. You don't have to pay them
Yeah.
for it. And so there's this kind of sentiment of this grousing. It's like, well, that's not, cool that companies are harvesting our free labor and, doing whatever. And I look at
Yeah.
that and I say, look, this is best of both worlds for me, because Plausible's open enough that I was able to fix my problem. I was
Yeah.
empowered to fix my problem. And then they accepted that fix and took it on board. And now everybody benefits, because I fixed it,
Mhm.
but I don't have to maintain it. Like I don't have to
Yeah.
maintain it. So to me, that's like, I want there to be a company. I want there to be a single vendor like I want
Yeah.
Plausible to be a healthy, successful company that's going to maintain that into the future. And I don't have to think about it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really resonate with that.
Yeah.
That sentiment. I think there's a lot of value to, call it fair source, or fair source is an opinionated slice of source available.
Yeah.
Source available is like a big broad thing. Fair source is a very opinionated take on source available.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's value there.
Yeah. I like that take about how it's like you can fix something or contribute, but you don't have the air quotes stress of maintaining the
Yeah.
project,
And I
and
pay them $6 a month, and I, love their product, and, quite happy to do that. And then if some bugs me enough, I can jump in. It's like best of both worlds, I think.
yeah. And it's like, at least from like a developer standpoint, like that argument about free labor, and there's some privilege as well, to be honest, about contributing to open source. Not
Yeah,
everybody
sure.
has time to just, I recognize that, but like I've found, like, to your point, like I've always, I see something, oh, I'd like to help there or make it better. Like I was there's something like a couple months ago, Adia's man, he has like some chat UI that you just run locally for local LMs, and just put up a issue about like, oh, there's huge bundle sizes in the JavaScript, and I knew exactly what to do. So I was like, okay, I'll do this, because it wasn't a big fix, but it had a big impact, and it
Yeah,
made me feel good.
you're in the right place at the
Selfishly,
right time. Yeah.
yeah, selfishly, it does put myself out there too. Like, oh, Nick fixed this thing. So like, that's why, like, I don't know. I've been lucky enough in open source. I've done a lot, and it's helped expose me to jobs and stuff. But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I just think it's, there's the not being paid. There's a recognition factor in and being a part of the community that can actually go a lot longer, a lot further than just like, here's $100.
Oh, definitely.
You know,
Yeah.
not that I wouldn't say no to money, but like,
Yeah. I mean, when I joined Sentry 4+ years ago, I submitted an application like usual through whatever, and I submitted a few pull requests, to the project that I was going to, and it absolutely, I found out once they hired me, they're like, yeah, that definitely made you stand out. I think anybody applying for a job at a company with open source projects, like there's no reason not to, submit a couple pull requests with it. Some simple
Yeah,
stuff.
for sure. I did that too. I didn't get the job at Khan Academy, but like this is back in 2018. But I was like, this looks interesting. I spoke to some people that worked there, and then I noticed they had some open source stuff. So I did the same thing, submitted my CV and some cover letter. And I was like, just FYI, I put up this PR. I just mentioned it in my cover letter. And I can't say for certain, but I'm like 99.99% certain that's why I got the interview over somebody else, That's
cool.
So
Is that the John Resig era or after?
Yeah, it was. And so okay, it sucked I didn't get the job there, but the cool thing was, like, I had a 1-hour interview with John Resig, the creator of jQuery. So like that alone was just a win for me. So
he was one of the first. So I mentioned I did this crowdfunding platform 10 years ago, and to seed it at first, I was like, well, I need some open source developers on there to be able to pay. And so he was one of the 6 that I contacted to
Okay.
list on the site at first. So he was the first one on the site. Yeah. So I got to, I caught up with him one time in Brooklyn, and we had and actually Ashley Williams was there too. The 3 of us like
Okay.
hung out. She's like, she did a lot with Rust and the Rust Foundation and whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know. I have a wonderful memory of sitting on the banks of the water, looking out towards Manhattan, hanging out with John and Ashley and talking about open source and tech and everything. It's cool.
No, that's super cool.
It's open source, man. It's about the people, it's about hanging out. It's about, doing this.
No, I definitely like, one of the things I love about all the jobs I've had since 2020 is I get to work with the developer community in some capacity in open source. So it's definitely, I love that aspect for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, you were talking about, so like we're talking about Fair Source. You contributed, you didn't get paid for that, but like we just kind of rehashed that. But like, that's okay. And they're like Fair Source, and it's one single entity running that. Let's talk about, stuff that I've done a lot of stuff in the Node and front end world. So like can definitely think of some clear examples. Like so Babel.js, which came out, I don't know, like 2014 or 2015, like that project literally changed the JavaScript ecosystem. And it was literally one maintainer at the time,
Henry
Sebastian, or no, even before him, it was Sebastian McKenzie. And then he got burnt out. And then I think Henry, I don't remember when Henry took over, but like basically like a project that is so critical to literally all front end build tooling at the time. Maybe not so much nowadays. It probably is still, but like, this comes to the question about funding in open source. This person, was doing this as a project just to see if they could get some modern JavaScript, and then it took off.
Yeah.
The burnout's a whole other thing, but like just the funding, because like you literally had everybody on the planet who was doing front end or at least React at the time using this. So like, so yeah, let's just talk about funding now at this point. So like in that kind of scenario, like, where does OSS Pledge come in? Let's assuming they were back there back in the day.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I think it's very much related to the word you used, burnout. The funding and the burnout, and I don't know. People have different opinions on this, but the way that I think about open source sustainability, I have a pretty particular definition for it, which is when anybody can make a widely adopted open source component and be paid fairly without having to jump through hoops. Okay. So paid fairly without having to jump through hoops, because that's the awesome thing about open source is like, like you said, you can scratch your own itch and put it up on NPM or whatever, GitHub.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're getting all these millions, hundreds of millions of downloads. You have all this attention. Okay. But then the other side of that, how do you get paid fairly without jumping through hoops?
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, you bring open source and money together and you start mashing them up and it gets weird, right?
Yeah.
The way that I've kind of come around to looking at this, and tell me what you think about this. Open source is a gift economy. Let me unpack this, okay? So we've got a market economy and we've got a gift economy. The market economy is what most of us are the most used to, which is like, I walk into 7-Eleven, the convenience store, Tim Hortons or whatever, and I'm gonna buy a pack of M&Ms, and I like show the M&Ms to the robot, and then I show my phone to the robot, and it beeps, and I get to walk away. And the point is, it's a neat and tidy transaction because money is this abstraction that is fungible, and so it's like, all right, money changed hands. So you've got the money, I've got the M&Ms. We walk away, and that robot and I have nothing to do with each other after that. It's a clean transaction. That's the market economy and the way we exchange things in the market.
Yeah.
The gift economy, though, think about, well, what? We went out to that Greek restaurant together, didn't we?
Yeah.
Others, right? And then at the end, the check comes, and it's like, all right, how are we gonna split this check? And imagine if you and I go out to eat, and it's like you and I are fighting over the bill at the end of it, right? And it's like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
going to get this one. I'm going to get this one. All right. And if I let you pick up the tab, then what do I say at the end? I say,
Yeah.
I'm going to get it next time.
Yeah.
I say, I'm going to get it next time. Point being, when you and I walk away from that exchange, there's an obligation, there's a connection, there's a relationship. It's like, me and the
Yeah.
robot, there was no relationship after that. But, me and Nick, after we have dinner together and, I let you pick up the
Yeah.
tab, we walk away from that. There's a connection, there's a relationship.
Yeah.
That's the gift economy. The gift economy is a system of exchange based on this idea that accepting or receiving a gift carries with it some kind of, we talk about the words obligation, invitation,
Yeah.
expectation to reciprocate at some point in the future. So you track it so far? You ready?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's
I
bring it
love
back to
this
open
analogy.
source. Yeah.
Yeah.
So open source is a gift economy, meaning software developers, maintainers give the gift of software to the world. You
Yeah.
publish your package, you put up Babel on NPM or GitHub or whatever, right? It's a gift to the world. And what's happened after decades
Yeah.
is the world's received the gift. The companies of the world are using it's that XKCD comic that we could bring up, right? Like
Yeah. The
with
Nebraska.
yeah,
Yeah.
Nebraska project, right? So
Yeah.
like they've swallowed the pill. The global economy, human civilization has swallowed the pill of open source, has received the gift of open source.
Yeah.
And what the pledge is saying is, okay, you receiving this gift, and again, we can talk about the nuance.
Yeah.
Receiving that gift comes with an expectation. Obligation, I feel, is too strong. I like the word
Yeah.
invitation. It comes with it because it should be a free gift. It's like,
Yeah.
I like we don't need like weird hangups and resentment and stuff. It's like, look, take it. I gave it to you. And
Yeah.
the very fact of like you seeing me do this is an invitation to you. Like
Mhm.
and again, it's mixed up and there can be multiple motives happening at once, right? Where it's like you were saying, you was the one you just shared about you Adi's LLM project, right? And you
Yeah.
make a commit to that, there's always multiple levels to all these things because we're humans. We're not like
Yeah.
siloed creatures.
Totally.
We're like integrated. But that's where I go to when I think about the economics of open source and the
Yeah.
funding of open source. It's like, it's not a market economy. It's a gift economy. And that's kind of a new thing for a lot of us to think about. But
Yeah.
that's where I think we have to start if we're thinking about money and open source.
Yeah. No, I
What
definitely
do you
love
think, Nick?
that, and I think that's a really great way to frame it, and I agree with you. It's not an obligation, but like we go out for dinner or like drinks or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's like drinks on me, and I
Yeah,
like
exactly.
in my head, I already have a checkbox to say like, okay, next time we're out, I'm getting the drinks or I'm getting dinner. It's
Yeah.
you know, hopefully everybody's good netizens, but as we
Yeah.
know, that's not the case.
Well,
And
and it's not an either or. It's like, I'm not out here trying to say the market economy is bad or anything like that. I'm out here saying open source doesn't fit neat and tidy into the market economy. And
yeah,
it's worth exploring this question of
yeah,
what if the companies of the world that have received the gift of open source
yeah,
sort of evolved the capacity to reciprocate not
yeah,
only with their own open source software that they're publishing, they do that, not only
yeah,
with gifts in kind, like, we donate Sentry credits to open source projects. Okay. So
yeah,
there's timing code. There's number two is gifts in kind, but this third bucket of cash, what if
yeah,
companies were able to evolve this capacity to pay significant amounts of money back
hmm
to the maintainers of the project? I don't know. It's an interesting experiment
yeah. And
at the
it's
very
like,
least.
I don't know, the way I see it. I mean, obviously, I don't balance the books at these big companies,
Right.
but like, I feel like, you know, for example, like say Microsoft or Google just dropping even like $1 million in OSS is like
Yeah.
probably literally nothing.
Yeah.
That's like that's just kind of like, hey,
Yeah.
I've got drinks this week or something,
Yeah.
you
Yeah. I
know?
think Google did 5 million last year or something. They have some
Okay,
blog post where they talk about it. And they
yeah,
made 90 billion. I don't know. What was their revenue last year? $100 billion or something.
yeah.
I don't even know.
So I mean, it's still good that they gave that 5 million,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but yeah, it's just like I'm really surprised, and like obviously this is part of the mission of open source pledge, but like
Yeah.
it's kind of mind boggling to me that I can understand. Well, here's a side tangent for a second. So like me,
Yeah.
I'm an OSS dev.
Yeah.
I do sponsor people. So like I give $5,
Cool.
$10 to some people that I
Awesome.
think are great projects or actually projects I use.
Yeah.
And I think that's good, but
Awesome.
I feel like that's not sustainable. You know,
It's got to be the
like
companies. They're the ones with the money,
yeah,
right?
you know, like
They're the ones
yeah,
with the money. Yeah.
like I'm happy to do that. And like even okay, sure, maybe a million people end up doing that. Maybe I don't even know how many people actually who are individuals that actually sponsor, but
Yeah.
I feel like because like I've talked to I think you know Josh Goldberg.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So Josh Goldberg went
TypeScript,
full
yes,
time on.
yeah.
Yeah. He went full time open source a couple years ago, and
Yeah.
he's pretty transparent about it in terms of how much he makes and stuff. And it's like,
yeah,
he's you know he's got a partner where like they can have a 2 income
right,
household, so that
right.
just works out. But basically, he was kind of alluding to it's like just with the donations from people, it doesn't really create a salary. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, I'm sure he gets some companies too, but like, and yeah, this just so like I think that's like a nice thing to do, but it's really what you're talking about, which is the companies and I feel like I don't know because it getting back to your free labor thing, it's like, hey, I'm using Babel or I'm using Veet now. You know, okay, Veet's a little different. They just got funding with their company. It's a maybe bad example potentially, but prior to that, like everybody's using Veet, like literally their entire build tool chain for Node or JavaScript. You know, it just makes sense for a company like the amount of hours they would have had to pay engineering to do that. You know, and I'm kind of formulating a question here, but does the open source pledge have some kind of formula to propose to companies, like about how much they should consider?
Yeah. So I don't know if you're intentionally giving me the softest of softball questions because
that was literally natural, but if it's
okay,
a softball,
I love it because I was thinking this would be a good place to go next, just in terms of the details of the pledge and what it is. So the pledge. Well, let me get into it this way. We'll get a little more because we got plenty of time on the clock, right? We're here for a little bit, so I can go into some detail.
Oh yeah, for sure. And if you want to share your screen for anything, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so again, I joined Sentry 4+ years ago. I was an IC engineer on our open source team, mostly doing release engineering for our self-hosted release, but then also building out GitHub automations to help our growing engineering team stay on top of the traffic we're getting on GitHub. So like custom automations for notifications into Slack and this kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
But had this history with GitTip and, funding open source and David Kramer knew all about that. And so he asked me pretty early on when I joined to give money to open source projects. And again, Sentry was on GitTip in 2012. Before that, David was individually funding people, right? So like it's been a core thing for him and for Sentry. So when I arrived, he was like, Chad, let's get organized, give $100,000 to open source, whatever. And it took a little bit, but it ended up being $155,000.
Okay.
And it was great. So I ran this program where I looked at all our dependencies and, I kind of ran the numbers and allocated this $150,000 across hundreds of projects and gave the money out, paid the maintainers, and it was awesome. He asked me to do the same thing the year after that. It ended up becoming a yearly program for us. So year one was 155K. Year two, it was 260K. Year three, it was 500K. And, we sort of saw the impact that this was having. And so by year four, he was like, okay, this is great, but we can't do it all ourselves. To really have impact, we need other companies to do this as well. And that's where the pledge comes in. The pledge is our invitation. Come back to this word invitation.
Yeah.
Our invitation to peer companies, other companies, to join us in this. And you asked about the threshold or the amount.
Yeah.
The way that we think about this is dollars per developer.
Okay.
Who benefits the most from open source software instead of a company? It's the developers, right? It's like if that software didn't exist, your developers would have to go write it or you'd have to buy it or whatever. Okay. All right. So if your company employs 100 developers, the figure we use is $2,000 per developer. So if you employ 100 developers,
Okay.
your dues to join the pledge is $200,000. So
Okay.
what you do is you would go pay open source maintainers $200,000, and then you'd write a blog post about it and you'd brag
Okay.
about it. And you'd say, hey, we love open source. We just paid,
Yeah.
$200,000, and here we gave this much to the OpenJS Foundation. We gave this much to the Python. You give us the receipts, who you paid, and that's it. So it's
Yeah.
$2,000 per dev, pay maintainers, and then write that blog post, annual report,
Yeah.
bring that to us, give us your logo and some other stuff, and we get you
Yeah.
onboarded.
So the thing about that too is like, because I mentioned marketing and open source before,
Yeah.
this is like even if you're Evil Corp X,
Yeah,
you
sure.
know, and you the
Wait,
CEO
was
just
X
like,
supposed to be a
oh no,
placeholder
sorry,
name or
no, yeah, it was supposed to be a
or a state?
placeholder name.
Okay.
Yes,
Evil
but
Corp Flu, Acme.
I will let people read into that if they want to,
Acme
but
Corp.
like, yeah, some placeholder company, just like the CEO's like, screw this,
Enron.
like, yeah, well, that's been a minute. But
Sorry.
oh no, it's all good, but basically it's like, even if they hate doing it, it's actually good PR for the company. So I
I
guess
love
you could
that kind of open
technically,
washing. I'll
yeah,
take
yeah,
that all day. Yeah,
yeah.
right.
So I guess it's okay to be evil and still help out. I don't know, but
Because we're
yeah,
trying to make it a meaningful amount. I mean, $2,000 per dev, it kind of depends on your perspective. Is it a lot? Is it not a lot? What's the,
yeah,
what's the value you're getting from open source? And honestly, that's how I got to that number. I came up with that number in 2017 when GitTip
okay,
was winding down. It was called GratiPay at that point, but I made a blog post and I did some napkin math looking at GDP
okay,
and spitballing, well, how much of GDP, which is like 80 trillion or whatever, I don't know, is like due to open source software. And
yeah,
I came up with a number that was like, I don't know, we could go dig it up, $850 billion or something, and
okay.
divided that by the number of developers or something in the world. It was like 20 million. Does that math work out? Anyway, so I came up with a figure,
Sounds good.
$2,000 per developer. Yeah. And
Yeah,
we ended up running. So that's what we used at Sentry, when we
okay,
started our program, and just kind of carried it through with the pledge. And it's great, man. So we launched the pledge about 6 months ago, last
yeah,
October, rented 3 of the most expensive billboards in the world in San
yeah,
Francisco, had some fun with that. Yeah, NASDAQ helped us out in Times Square. We're actually going to do, so here's a plug if anybody's listening. We're going to
yeah.
do another NASDAQ spot on May 6th. So if
Oh,
your
nice.
company joins the pledge by April 30th, we'll be able to put your logo on the NASDAQ Jumbotron in Times
Nice, nice.
Square. Again, the marketing thing. Because,
Yeah,
that's what
yeah,
this is all about. This is about co-marketing. It's about
yeah,
changing a social norm around funding, responding to that invitation.
yeah. There's I don't know the real name, but Real RLG just has this question here. It
Yeah,
says,
let's see.
for little dev shop / agency, 2,000 per dev seems to be pretty high. I guess it's subjective. I don't know, or
Kind of, yeah. I mean, nothing's going to be perfect, right? So we had to
yeah,
come up with something, and we try to come up with because we want the pledge to be meaningful. We want it to mean something when you
yeah,
see open source pledge member in the footer of a company's website or on their careers page. We want it to be like,
yeah,
oh, okay, they actually put their money where their source is.
yeah,
Shout out to Jared from Changelog for that one. Put your
yeah,
money
yeah,
where your source is. Yeah, so we try to come up with something that gave us at least a hope of working across many different company sizes. So if you're a small dev shop, and we've got this, if we go to open source pledge /members, Sentry is actually not the largest company by number of developers on there, which is cool. We have another
yeah.
company called Posit that has like 134 developers, I think. We
Okay.
also have a number of one-person shops. But the
Yeah,
point is, it scales with the number of developers. So if you
yeah,
only have 1 or 2 developers, then it's $2,000. Come on, $2,000 a year. You can't give $2,000 a year for open source software that
yeah,
is the complete foundation for your whole success in business.
yeah,
It
yeah.
scales up, it scales down.
I feel like I could burn through $2,000 of my salary very quickly, anyways. If I'm just thinking about
Coffees.
something.
How much
Yeah,
do you
yeah,
spend on coffee a year or whatever, right? Starbucks or
yeah,
whatever. I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You got to factor it in, but we wanted something that was big enough to be meaningful, but obviously, you know, it's a tough balance, right? Not so much that
Yeah.
that people aren't going to join. And the good news is, I think we found it because we've got 33 companies after 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, there's a few more, you know, that we're talking to right now, and looking forward to seeing what the year brings.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I'm gonna drop a link to a post I can't remember if you reposted it on LinkedIn or not, but you're talking about this ecosystems in terms of the payout, I think. And this is something I wanted to touch on. So
Okay.
like there's the open source pledge, and that from what you've explained, it seems to be like, hey, let's just get you on board. But from what I just kind of headline skimmed this before the stream, so
Okay.
please correct me if I'm wrong. But
Yeah.
the open source pledge itself isn't the one that handles the payouts, from what I understand. Is that right? Or
Right. Sorry, I was multitasking. I was catching up on the chat that I wasn't fully paying attention to and seeing all the good stuff in there. So you're asking about that question of how the money's handled, and yeah. So right, and I think we were touching on this earlier. It might have been before the stream started. Pledge does not touch any money.
Okay.
Our goal is to incentivize the creation of an ecosystem where we call them platform partners. Think GitHub sponsors, Open Collective, thanks.dev, you know, these kind of platforms that enable, I mean, it was what GitTip was back in the day, right? Like these crowdfunding platforms, you know, we want to incentivize them to do what they do well. So we're trying to keep the pledge focused and small and really be about that marketing piece and that co-marketing and that branding.
Yeah. Looks like Jörn was, I think Jörn was initially shocked by the 2,000 per dev because I think he thought it was monthly, but is this per year?
Yeah, it's per year. It's per year.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Jörn.
Yeah. So he's like, oh yeah, no, 2,000 per year.
You can do it per year.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Join by April 30th, and we'll put you on a Times Square NASDAQ billboard.
Yeah. And I got to say that marketing aspect is really great because like, I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but like most jobs I've been, like any job I moved to since I got into open source, like I'm always like, if I'm like ready to move, I'm always looking for like, is it in open source in some capacity, even if it's a paid product. And so like, I really do think like from a hiring standpoint, if people see, oh, like OSS, like, to me, that's always like a huge win for me. I love working in public, so like I'm gonna search for those things. So.
Nick, you're giving me another softball.
Oh no! For people in the chat, we did not rehearse this.
This is looking really bad for us. No, we have a job board. We added a job board a couple weeks ago, so you can go to opensourcepledge.com/jobs, and we aggregate all the jobs of the member companies of the open source pledge. Nice. So if you want to work for a company that puts its money where its source is with open source and you know cares about open source, opensourcepledge.com/jobs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is super funny. I'm 100% not giving him softball questions on purpose.
I'm kidding you.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, you found the I did want to address Anthony was talking about the percentage thing.
Okay.
The revenue percentage instead of, we considered that. The challenge there is, you know, a company like Sentry, we're a private company and we don't really want to telegraph revenue. You know what I mean? Public company. Yeah. Maybe when we get to big enough that public companies are joining, you know, maybe we'll have both options or something, but this seems to be working out pretty well so far.
No, that's good. That's awesome.
It's some other stuff. Cool. Webpack shout out. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think they were funding, what's his name? Sean, I forget his last name. He's at Microsoft now.
Yeah, but, I can picture him.
Yeah.
L?
Long hair. Sean Larkin.
Larkin. That's it. Yeah. He did great.
JavaScript age.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Where's I going to go next? I was going to say something else. I was going to give you the inside scoop. If you want.
Okay. I am here for the inside scoop. Yes.
You and I, Sean Larkin, that's it. You and I scheduled this a while ago.
Yeah.
It's been on the books.
I think it was 2 months ago, maybe.
Yeah.
So
a lot's happened in my life in the past 2 months, Nick.
Okay. Oh, let's hear it.
My role at Sentry has evolved further.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, still head of open source, but kind of the scope of the role is becoming more and more external. You know, I started with this, you know, as this IC engineer doing this release engineering, and then started doing this funding stuff and doing
Yeah.
more and more outside. And you know, last year launched this pledge and fair source. And do you know about syntax?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm one of the early listeners of
I was
Syntax.
gonna say you have to. Yeah,
I have a funny
Wes and
Westbot
Scott.
story I can tell you after if you
Oh,
want.
okay.
It's okay to say it on
It's
live
okay
air.
on air. Okay, we're
Yeah, yeah,
good.
yeah.
I want to hear that. So I've joined the syntax team at Sentry.
Okay, nice.
That's like my main home inside of Sentry right now is the syntax team.
Oh,
Because
cool.
Pledge is kind of a little bigger than Sentry. You know what I mean? There's like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And I'm going to be launching a show on the syntax YouTube channel
Oh,
a
nice.
week from today.
Okay.
And it's going to be, dude, it's going to be, I don't know. We're going to see how it does. It's going to be
It's gonna be
a
spicy.
reality show. What's that?
I said, is it gonna be spicy?
We'll see. It's going to be a reality show about my quest to grow the open source pledge
Okay.
from 32 companies paying $2.5 million a year to 1,000 companies paying $100 million a year
Okay.
in open source. So the pilot episode comes out a week from tomorrow, but it's
Okay.
like, here's the thing. They were like, Chad, what do you think about doing a show about open source? And I was like, well, that
Yeah.
sounds cool, but you know, I don't know. It's hard. Folks, we need to give Nick some appreciation here because it is actually hard work to run a good podcast, okay, and to
Yeah.
like have guests and like be a good interviewer and everything. And I found that was just not the sweet spot for me. So I'm trying to
Okay.
do this narrative show, which is
Okay.
like a reality show about my quest to heal the world through open source by growing the open source pledge.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
So
that's cool.
I don't know. Yeah, watch for that on Syntax a week from today. Today's Thursday, a week from today.
Okay, that explains why I was going through LinkedIn, or maybe it showed up on my socials, but I saw like
Yeah.
a 30-second clip of you talking with Wes and Scott. So I guess that's what that is.
I joined their podcast. Yeah, so that episode aired last week as kind of a warm up, and we got a couple clips out of it. But yeah, the show launches a week from today. Aiming for 3 more episodes this year. But yeah, man, I'm gonna go. I don't know. We got to blow this thing up, man. This is like, how do we?
Yeah.
I mean, we need 1,000 companies on there. We've got 32. You know, we got our work cut out for us.
Yeah, it's pretty ambitious, but I feel like you can do it. I believe in you.
Thanks, man. It's gonna be a group effort.
Yeah. No, that's super cool. And honestly, it also sounds like it's gonna be fun just to do, you know? Like
yeah, it's kind of terrifying, but I think I'm over the hump of like, okay, I think I can do this. You know, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I think yeah. I'm picturing kind of like The Office. Yeah,
exactly. I went back you know, Nathan For You. Do you know this show, Nathan For You, or like How To with John Wilson? I ended up like, you know, getting a subscription to HBO Max and like expensing that to Sentry as part of my like continuous education, continuous
research.
learning. Yeah, exactly. Research, right? Went back and watched a bunch of old documentaries and stuff. Okay. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Because this is the thing, man. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
I see kind of 4 points on the compass for making this change in the world. At the bottom is where I put the open source true believers. The people, okay, so the Open Source Initiative just had their election for new board members. Okay. Guess how many people voted in the election?
I feel like it's going to be pretty low, maybe. I don't know. 20?
Okay, not quite that low. 150. Okay. So out of 8 billion people in the world, a world that depends on open source for all of its software. 150. So what percentage is that? 150 divided by 8 billion. 150 people in the world care enough about open source to vote in the Open Source Initiative board election. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
pretty wild.
That's like the open source insiders, let's call them. Okay, right?
Yeah.
The inner circle, for some definition. Okay. And at the other end of that axis, so north on our compass,
Yeah.
that's where I put the 8 billion. You know, all
Okay.
the people in the world who, whether they know it or not, have a phone that's chock full of open source software. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you open your phone and you go into legal, you go into settings legal on your phone. Are you an iPhone guy or do you have an Android?
You have an iPhone. Yeah.
Okay. So if you open up your iPhone and you go into settings legal and you go into licenses and you scroll down, this is so great. Do you know about the beerware license?
I don't, but I like
Oh
the way
yeah,
it sounds already.
yeah. Yes, you are gonna love this. The beerware license is one of the simplest open source licenses, and honestly, it's my favorite.
Okay.
Even though it's not technically OSI approved, it's another
Yeah.
story. Um, FreeBSD, PHK, Poul Hennenkamp, is this Danish developer. He wrote like half of FreeBSD. He wrote the Varnish HTTP cache that Fastly is, you know, a commercialization of. Okay, so he's like, you know, epic developer. Yes, and he has this beerware license, which is like, you can do whatever, you know, Poul Hennenkamp wrote this. You can do whatever you want with this stuff.
Yeah.
And if you like it, you can buy me a beer someday if you want to.
Okay.
Okay. There's literally, that's the beerware license. It's like, hey, take this stuff, use it. You know, if you like it, buy me a beer. All right. Apple is using software from PHK under the beerware license. Apple
That
has
is
agreed
amazing.
to the terms of the beerware license. Anyway, so that, how'd I get there? This 8 billion that have beerware on their phones and don't know about it, right?
So we all owe this guy a beer.
Or somebody does. Apple?
Yeah.
But
Apple probably. Yeah.
obligation or
Yeah. Oh,
invitation?
you're right. Yeah. Well played. Well
Obligation or
played.
invitation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then on this east-west, that's where I put producers and consumers. You know, Josh that's making TypeScript ESLint, and you know, the companies, the Microsofts of the world or whoever that are consuming that software. So the producers of the open source software and the consumers of the open source software. So yeah, between those four groups, yeah, that's like the world that I'm trying to inhabit here and the connections I'm trying to make there. So it's like, dude, it's fun. I go into my local bar and I just like interview people and be like, have you ever heard of open source software? And they're like, no, what's that? I'm like, you have beerware on your phone? Yeah. So we're getting into all that.
That's amazing. But yeah, so okay, so yeah, so like I guess like we'll see once the first episode comes out, but are you gonna be, I'm assuming you're gonna be traveling around with this, you know, like
I booked a trip to, all right, so here's the inside scoop. Episode's coming out a week from tomorrow. You're getting the inside scoop about the one after this. Okay. I booked a trip to New York City for May 6 and 7.
Okay.
Coming up here, because May 6th is when our next NASDAQ billboard goes up for the pledge. Yeah. And so my goal is to be standing in Times Square and see, you know, behind me on the camera, the open source pledge billboard, and then like, I don't know, interview people in Times Square about open source and see if they know what beerware. Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna have some fun. You know what I mean? So so I'm going to do that on next week. So tomorrow I'm supposed to go visit a friend of mine who's a CPA by background to be like, hey, how do CPAs think about the gift economy? You know, I don't know. Yeah. Just like see what we can figure out, because and then next Wednesday I'm supposed to go to the local community college and join a friend of mine as a professor there, as a business professor, and she's bringing me in for her last class of the year to talk to her students about the gift economy of open source. And be like, nice. I don't know.
No, that's cool though, man.
Spread the word.
Yeah. No, and like I said, I think it sounds like it's gonna be a lot of fun, and you're obviously gonna be at conferences and stuff too.
Oh yeah.
Do you know if you're gonna be at All Things Open again, or?
I probably will be. Yeah. So. Yeah, I'm a little. Let me see. What else do I have coming up this year? I mean, are you going to All Things Open?
Yeah, I'll be going. Maybe Cascadia JS. It depends. I just submitted my CFP. Trying to think. There's some other events like related to work. So like these are like Black Hat in the States, and I think Observability Con,
Okay.
which I can't remember where that's at, but
Okay.
there's definitely a few. But
Yeah.
yeah, All Things Open is, I've kind of fallen in love with that conference. I spoke at the All Things Open AI a couple months ago too,
Nice.
so
How was that?
it's really good, and it was, you know, it was really well organized, just like All Things Open. It was it's pretty amazing.
Todd's crew.
Todd's amazing and the crew, but like I don't want to say they put it together quickly, but like that conference kind of just materialized, and it was a great venue.
It's awesome.
Everything was well organized, you know. So
it wasn't at the same conference center. It wasn't at the convention
no,
center. It was a smaller
this
venue,
one wasn't
probably.
in Raleigh. This was in Durham. It was at it's called the Carolina Theater. So I actually gave my talk. Yeah, I gave my talk in a literal movie theater, which was kind of cool. So yeah,
that's fun.
But yeah, no, okay, so that's cool. So like the only reason I'm asking about conferences is like anybody who's into open source, if you see Chad's face, go and say hi.
Yeah.
Who knows? You might end up on a syntax episode too.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's the thing now. I'm like, do I have to record everything I do? You know, like, I don't know. Do you ever see How To with John Wilson? A little more obscure.
I have not, but
produced by Nathan Fielder, so the Nathan For You guy. A little connection there, but no, that's my favorite show I've found in my research that I've been, expensing to Sentry. Yeah, because I have this feeling that open source has so much untapped potential, like to change the world. Like what we get to experience in open source and open source projects, I feel like we take it for granted. Like how cool it is that you can just drop in and, work alongside Adios Money and everybody else and contribute to these projects and go to meetups and, go to conferences and hang out. Like, it's just a really good way to be productive in the world with friends and building stuff and sharing.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, could there be more of this? Can this be more normal than not? And aren't there 8 billion people that would love to be part of this or something similar to it? And I don't know, man, that's what I want to explore. That's what I want to try and bring about.
Yeah, no, I think it's an amazing effort that you're doing out there. It's just I'm just curious to see how it all plays out long term. But I hope people are up for the challenge, because it really is a drop in the pond for companies at the end of the day, So it's and any evil CEOs listening, good market. It's good marketing. It's good marketing.
And evil CEOs looking to open wash the company. Go for it. I want to answer. I think this is Jorn again asking if I've ever published anything under the Beerware license, and the answer is yes, I definitely have. Nice. If you go to my GitHub, it's Chad Whitacre, and let me think there, because I looked at this when I was looking at the Beerware, because this dates to the aughts. I made some little utilities for some FreeBSD stuff. Yeah, here you go. Oh, wow. Did I do Kraken? I made a mailing list server called Kraken, release the Kraken.
Okay, yeah.
That one was fun because it was based on IMAP, if I remember right. So you would, the server would pull this IMAP mailbox and just take whatever it found in there and blast it out to a list. So the way that you published to this mailing list was you just sent email to an IMAP mailbox, and then it got picked up and sent out to everybody. Yeah, so that was called Kraken, and I used the Beerware license for that. I'm looking through. I just did a search for Beerware on my GitHub, owner Chad Whitacre. But there were some others. There was a JRC. I think there was one called JRC, which was a jail. If anybody remembers, if anybody's an old head with FreeBSD and remembers jail, which was an early containerization implementation. Let's see. Oh yeah, they're all in Chad Whitacre /public. The repo's called public, and that's where a bunch of my old. I think I took my Subversion server and put it up on GitHub.
Subversion, yeah.
Yeah, man.
I haven't heard that in a minute.
There's a name that I've not heard.
Yeah. Did you use Tortoise SVN with it?
A little bit, yeah. I mostly used the command line.
Okay.
But yeah, I used JRC. What did JRC do? I'm looking. I made a man page for it and everything.
Okay.
Oh yeah, okay. It was just a wrapper to start and stop jails, clean
Okay.
things up. Yeah,
I'll.
yeah. I've definitely done a few things under beer. I'll tell you why it's my favorite open source license is because it strikes that note of invitation in the
Yeah.
best way. You think about MIT, BSD, that's all fine. It's like, do whatever you want, no warranty expressed or implied,
Yeah.
but you got to give attribution. Okay, that's fine. It's kind of dry.
Hmm.
On the other end is the copyleft, the, GNU GPL,
Yeah.
which is just so browbeating and heavy-handed, and it's like trying to fight the enemy with his own weapons or something. You know what I mean? It's like trying
Yeah.
to use all this legalese to, and it turns out that they win anyway because they come up with more legalese that, okay, what I mean is, all right, AGPL
Yeah.
plus a contributor license agreement is essentially a defeat of the free software movement. Okay.
Okay.
Here's what I mean by this. AGPL is this like extreme copyleft, this extreme share alike license where it says not just, even if it's just using it over the network, you have to share anything else, associated with the software, any modifications you make. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the nuclear GPL.
Okay.
But if a company, well, okay, and that's great if you have a community-based project, going back to this idea of like a community-based versus a corporate-owned project. If you
Yeah.
have a nonprofit community organized project, run project, AGPL is great because it does
Hmm.
protect that entity from,
Okay.
companies coming in and taking advantage of it. Okay. It means, if you make any changes to the software, you have to share them back with the community. Great.
Yeah.
But if a company uses AGPL and they pair it with a contributor license agreement, which
Okay.
is a legal document that says by giving, like I did this with Plausible. Actually, I predated Plausible CLA, but if I
Okay.
did it with Plausible today, I would be making this contribution with a contributor licensing agreement that says, Plausible, you have permission to do whatever you want with my contribution.
Okay.
And that introduces an asymmetry because now Plausible can do
Hmm.
whatever they want with my contribution. I can't do whatever I want with
Okay.
the contributions of everybody else and with their code. Like I need to abide by the AGPL,
Yeah.
but they don't necessarily have to. They can do whatever they want. And so there's this asymmetry. And so AGPL plus a CLA is this
Okay.
like is the defeat of Richard Stallman is how I think of it, because like
Okay.
you're trying to use the legal system to
Hmm.
force companies to share and to like bind them to this obligation, this like community expectation. But then
Yeah.
they're like, dude, come on, we invented law. We're gonna like just law our way out of, like we're gonna beat you at this game. Like we own this
Yeah.
game, Yeah. What I love about
Okay.
Beerware is it strikes that note of invitation. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, here's the stuff, use it. And, if you want to, I invite you to, buy me a metaphorical beer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an actual beer. Maybe it's your own code. Maybe it's, make your own contribution. I love that
Yeah.
note. I love the invitation of
Yeah. No,
open
I think
source.
that's great. And honestly, you threw me a softball now. That's like a great way to kind of wrap up here. So,
Love it.
yeah, no, this has been a great conversation, Chad, and I'm pretty stoked to see the actual the series. Do you know what's it called, or is
It's
there no
going to be
name for it?
called Open Path. And it's
Okay.
going to come out here. I'll drop, there is a teaser out on Syntax Under Shorts.
Okay.
Let me grab that real quick. Yeah, this one here. It's a terrible thumbnail because you have to use the mobile app to do. Oh man,
Okay.
where can I post in the chat? Why am I not seeing it? Top
You can.
or the
There should be
bottom?
a private chat, or maybe
Is that
you
what I
can
used?
post it.
Oh, I can do this right here. Well, I'll do this, and then maybe you can.
Yeah. Okay.
You
I'll
got
go
that?
ahead
You can
and
link it over.
pop that in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Cool.
that's the trailer for the show.
Okay.
A
Cool.
little scattered,
So,
but
so
yeah, I
yeah.
feel
So
pretty good
definitely
about
check that out.
it.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it. Forgot about the West Spa story, but I can tell you after. It's
Oh,
nothing bad. It's nothing bad. It's just a funny anecdote because like I was
Did you guys
I
meet
was
up
just
somewhere? Or?
yeah, I met up at his house actually because I was in Toronto for family and stuff, and but basically
Yeah.
this was during the pandemic, and one of my daughters needed whatchamacallit, ibuprofen, and like there was a shortage of children's ibuprofen at the time, and
Did you turn Wes into a drug dealer? Is that what this
yeah,
story's about?
that's kind of what happened. So like he posted on Instagram like hey, my I brought some, I have some extra
Yeah,
ibuprofen
yeah,
from the
yeah.
States. I was just there. It's kids, because it's like kid one, it's specific.
Yeah,
and like we weren't following any each other on socials at this point, but
yeah,
I saw his Instagram post about it. I was like, not expecting him to answer. I was like, hey, I'm gonna be in Toronto visiting family. If you still have it, I'll
yeah,
take it.
yeah.
And then he DM'd me and
It
he's like,
happens.
yeah, just come get it. And then I was working at Netlify at the time, so
Okay.
I literally drove to his house, and he's like, here you go. And I was like, how much do you want or whatever. And then I also gave him some like Netlify stickers.
I love gift
And it was,
economy, right?
yeah, exactly. So one, I was very appreciative of it, but it was also just a story that just kind of cracks me up a bit too. Like
That's
two
cool.
Canadians meeting in the suburbs of Hamilton just to help a kid out.
Trade children's ibuprofen. Yeah, I love it, man. That's cool. Yeah,
Exactly.
bring it up with them.
Anyways, he's good people though. Anyways,
Nick, thanks so much for having me on. This has been real fun.
Yeah, no, this was great. And for everybody, check out opensourcepledge.com.
Absolutely.
If you are a company or run an agency like Yearn, try and contribute to this. And yeah, if you're an evil CEO, you benefit too. So do whatever you got to do.
I love it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in the next one. And Chad, if you don't mind just staying on for a second, and
of course.
take care, everybody.
See you, everybody. Thank you.